All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining in with us. I've got Todd Daehnert here with me. He's a licensed professional counselor here in the Allen area. Todd, thanks for joining with us today.
You bet. I'm glad to be
Yeah.
here, man.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. I know Todd from being in the counseling world. We've had a few interactions together, and he's a great guy. Loves the Lord, family man, lots of good qualities about him, but he's also a great counselor. And so I appreciate him coming on with us. Hey, Todd, if you want to take just a couple of seconds and talk about your practice, anything that you want to share with us, anything you want to plug about Daehnert Counseling.
Sure, man. I'd be glad to. I'll just, I guess, real quickly, I pretty much see anybody and everybody. If you're anywhere from 11, 12 to, 80 years old and you're actually willing to come in at that age, happy to see you. I do a lot of marriage and family counseling, do a lot of individual counseling with addictions, of course, depression, anxiety, seeing a lot of that right now in the practice. But pretty much I see kind of like a generalist as a practitioner. There's not one thing that I just necessarily specialize over another. So it's pretty much whatever you got an issue for, I'd be happy to see you.
Awesome. That's great. And I'll put Todd's website on the screen here. You'll see that here in just a second. But I appreciate Todd coming on. And so today, if you joined with us last time, we had we kind of talked about parenting, and Jennifer Bratt from Planting Seeds. We talked about just helps for parents in the middle of all of this. And so, but today I kind of wanted to focus more on our students. And when I say students, I'm probably talking about high school through college age, and just kind of dealing with what's going on in this new normal that we're living in. We call it normal. Sometimes we like to call it the new abnormal. But anyway, so Todd's jumped on here with us just to help answer some questions. I guess the first one I want to say is, Todd, what would you say are some warning signs or red flags that students need to be aware of that might signal that something's going on, something not right is going on? And again, we're talking about, emotional health, mental health. What are some red flags that students need to be looking out for?
You bet. Yeah, I'll tell you what I've seen in my office with students in particular is just pretty much any sign of depression. It's one thing when this whole thing started to be kind of like, okay, I'm feeling a little off and maybe feeling more anxious than normal. But, after a week or two, that kind of settles down for most of us. There's this new norm and this abnormal, as you said. But I think when you start getting into like more depressive symptoms, like, I know you're more easily irritated, more easily angered. You're not concentrating as well as you usually do. You're not motivated. I know a lot of kids are doing, well, obviously everybody's doing online school. So, they're finding like, get up 11, 12, 1 o'clock later than normal. They have no desire to do anything. They're procrastinating more. Those would be kind of some of the red flags. And then you get into more like severe things like maybe you're more easily triggered with addictive behaviors. You're acting out more than normal. I mean, no addictive behavior is healthy. But if you're finding yourself acting out even more so or more easily triggered with that, so that's a warning sign. And also isolation is one that I've seen a lot of, which again is pretty normal with people right now. Just want to kind of stay indoors and feeling so paranoid to get out and catch this virus. But it's not healthy to do that. So I think if you're doing it more so and you're finding yourself wanting to do it more, even from your family, I know a lot of kids like to kind of haul up in the room, but when you're up there and you don't come down at all for like days and days, you're not eating as well. That's probably not a good thing. So I think that's for as far as depression goes. And I think just again with anxiety, just, it's one thing to be a little irritable, but it's another to be like more restless, increased worry. You're more restless. You're more fearful. And then, things like panic attacks, et cetera, that's not good. So any kind of suicide ideation is obviously unhealthy. So those would probably be the big flags, I would say.
Those are some good ones. Why do you think it's so important for students to kind of avoid that negative self-talk? I mean, we've always got this voice going on in our head, but a lot of times that voice can turn super negative really fast. Why do you think they should avoid that? And then how do you maybe shut off that inner critic inside you?
You bet. It's a great question. And I'm the king of just most of my life, especially early on in my early adulthood, was just the king of being self-critical and negative self-talk. And I think it's not healthy to do it, but I think a lot of kids, when they do it, it's a normal thing. And particularly if you've got parental indoctrinations and things you've heard from family members or friends, it's easier for that to come up. But again, not being healthy, I think to listen to that, listen to the voice that's kind of going on inside of you, examine it, ask yourself, why are you having that? What's going on with it? But then I think it's really good to get out of your head onto a piece of paper, praying about it, journaling about it, talking about it to somebody, writing about it, whatever is healthy. Because at the end of the day, there's just nothing positive. There's nothing constructive. There's nothing healthy about any kind of negative self-talk. And again, since we're more isolated, we're not around people as much, the tendency is going to be for that to increase. So you got to be aware of it and mindful of it and just learn to combat it, really.
You mentioned, everybody kind of doing online school now, from high school, college students. Well, why do you think it's, and I realize every schedule kind of has to be held a little loosely, but why do you think it's important for a student to try to stay on somewhat of a schedule, or at least some semblance of one, and not do what you said, just stay up in the room all day long, all night long?
You bet. And I think schedules, I think we were, for one, created for routine and schedule. I really do. And again, that's easier for my personality. I'm being more of a type A driver. I like to check things off of a list. And so it's easy for me to say that, but I really do think God wants us to do that. I think we're a whole lot more productive. I think there's less procrastination going on. I think there's more room for growth, for positivity. I think it keeps us kind of hitting the ditches when it comes to temptations. I know for me that just throughout my life, when I'm bored, like today, I've kind of had a really, really slow day. And I find myself, my mind just kind of wanders. If I don't have things going on, go to church this morning, get up and take a nap. And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to talk to you at 5:30 today. What else do I have going on? I just tend to get lazier when I do that. So I think it's always important, especially right now, even though kids I know don't have to get up until, I don't know, most parents, maybe 9, 10, if you're a good parent, right? And they have 2 or 3 hours of homework. That's great. But then the rest of the day, they're on social media, Xbox, and whatever, and they're just kind of wasting away. So it's not that you have to get up at 6 or 7 in the morning until 12 at night. It's not like being rigid, but I think throughout the day, you're just a lot more productive when you have a schedule. I think
Yeah.
anybody that you talk to that's like uber successful, look at their schedule, and most of the time they'll say, yeah, look at it. And it's pretty much back to back all day long. And it just gets that way as you get older. You get more responsibilities. So,
That's huge. And I'm glad you're saying that, because as parents, if we say that, kids roll their eyes, whatever.
oh,
But
yeah,
it's good to
mine
have
do
someone
too.
else say it.
I get
So,
it.
yeah. So, what are some key tips you think for students to stay mentally healthy, emotionally healthy in the midst of the world we're living in right now?
You bet. It's a great question. I think that probably the best thing, again, that I would tell my clients on that, just in general, and again, now would be more imperative than ever, just having healthy boundaries right now. Know what your limits are. Having that routine is good. Know where your weaknesses are, the areas where you tend to struggle more. I know that see a lot of young ladies, especially with eating disorders. It's probably not a great idea to sit and eat more. Or guys that struggle with porn, it's probably not a good idea to be on the computer more. So to avoiding those things that kind of trigger you more, such as isolation or not having a routine, hence the boundaries. Exercising, getting out, obviously staying connected is huge, which again, we're limited on this whole sheltered home place and social isolation. But, again, we can do this on social media like you and I are doing right now. So I think just to stay involved is huge, and just to kind of keep your mind in check. And I don't think anytime it's ever unhealthy you can't pray enough during this time. And so I think that's obviously good. But so I think just being grounded and just watching yourself, but probably boundaries is the most important thing, I think, with ourselves.
That's good. Boundaries are so huge, because I think, like you said, if you don't set up, I think Andy Stanley, he calls them guardrails. If you don't set up those
Yes,
guardrails, then you'll run off. You'll run off the edge of the road before you know it. And
absolutely.
so that's good.
Absolutely.
So a lot of seniors, college students, high school students graduate or are supposed to be graduating this year. I mean, I know that's a lot of disappointment, and I guess maybe this is just more about a disappointment question, but
Mm.
what would you say to those students who are dealing with disappointment, dealing with frustrating, a lot of things that they were supposed to be doing, they're not getting to do? So what would you say in kind of maybe mourning those losses or grieving those losses?
I think you're hitting on one. It's just to grieve it. With I don't have any seniors right now, thankfully, but I've got a junior, and I've asked him a lot about his buddies that are seniors, and what's it like? He said, man, they're just devastated. So think back about when I was a senior in college or high school. I think I would just be so sorry, feel sorry for myself in a healthy way, not a pitiful way, but I would just be or I am so sorry. Anybody that's listening, this is a awfully challenging time, and not to get to celebrate what you worked your tail off for so many years. I mean, you go to school for 12 years, and then if you're a senior in college, in 4 years, you can't graduate in front of your friends and family. You can't go to normal celebration times. You're not getting to hang out with buddies. Lots of senior activities are going on the second semester after spring break. Can't do any of that. So that just stinks. It really does. So I think it's important to just be aware of it. And again, we're all in the same boat. I mean, obviously, I'm not in that place as far as education goes today, but a lot of our kids are. And so just be mindful of that. And I think being aware of the grief that you have, a lot of kids are that I know that I've talked to are just like, oh, it's no big deal. I'm not going to think about it. Some of them are frankly in shock still. So I think just the reality of it, just saying, this is horrible. Need to be aware of it, go through the stages of grief and then eventually get to a place, I think, where it's really healthy just to say, I got to let this go and I got to focus on what is. Again, not to minimize the pain and frustration that you felt at all, but at some point, again, we're on the same boat. You can't undo it. You hope it doesn't happen again. Again, if you're in high school, you have a chance to do that in college, but to move on and focus on like, wow, what am I going to get to do now? I get to look forward to college and, who are my roommates going to be and enjoy this time with your family right now. We're now tell so many people this, we're never going to have this kind of time again, probably as a family as we have right now. And if you've got seniors and if you're a parent, they're going to graduate. Golly, take advantage of this time because they're probably going to never want to come home now after all this time. They're like, get me the heck out of here. I'm done with this family. No, hopefully not. But anyway, I think that's the biggest thing, just to grieve it and just accept it and just move on. You have to focus on like what God has in front of you. He's not surprised by any of this. He knew it was going to happen. So
Yeah.
again, though it's not happened before, I think he prepared and equipped all of us for any kind of struggle that we're under. He knew in advance what we were going to be dealing with. So just kind of resting in that and just having kind of a realistic perception of it, just knowing it is what it is.
Yeah.
So
You mentioned parents, and we have a senior, and so we did we did this tacky prom at home yesterday for him. So we're
oh, that's
doing
great.
a makeshift thing. We ate Olive Garden and then we played ping pong. That's kind of what he wanted to do. But
That's
what do you
awesome.
what do you think? How do you think parents can help their students right now who are home, and who are dealing with life now? What are some tips that you would give for parents who are parenting and loving on and ministering to their kids right now, their students?
You bet. You bet. Great. Another great question. I think just being present, being aware, understanding, like again, putting yourself in their shoes, just having some level of empath, even if you're just not great at it. I know some people aren't. Just imagining what that would be like for them. Certainly if they're seniors, but any kids really, just to kind of, I think, just embrace that with them, join them with it. Let them find what their new normal is. I know for the first couple of weeks, my kids were just kind of just literally just like in a state of shock. They're just kind of walking around, their heads down, and kind of sitting in their rooms more. They didn't really know what to do. So we started, I avoid anything in my family where it's, talk time or anything like that because they're like, Dad's a therapist. He's going to, talk to us about our feelings. So I'm like, can I have that update? So we just kind of had nights, a couple of nights in a row. We're like, let's just talk about what's going on. So just get them just open up. Just think of open-ended questions versus, is this hard for you? Yes or no? Of course, they're going to answer yes or no, but like be more creative in that. Like, what's been the hardest part for you about this, and what can we do with you to join in this with you? Because we're in it with you. I know tempers or irritability is way up in families right now. I'm seeing a lot of families. I think it's going to be a lot more. They're coming in more depressed, a lot more suicidal ideation. I think with parents also being able to model to their kids, even though as hard as it is for them, like, well, how am I acting around my kids? How poorly am I talking to myself, or what am I saying to them? So just being mindful of that and aware that like they're gonna catch on. Like, well, this is how you struggle. This is how you handle the struggle, good or bad. So I think just joining with them first of all, letting them find their new norm, extending grace, and just having empath for them, knowing that we're all trying to figure what that's like right now.
I love what you said about kind of modeling that. Like how are we the negative self-talk as parents? What are we doing that? How are we
Yeah,
how are we doing with our grief? How are we doing with taking care of ourselves? And so
you
that's good.
bet.
We got to be models.
You
Um,
bet.
earlier you said something about we were talking about isolating, and what's so there is stay in place and those types of things, but what's the danger, and maybe talk about time alone versus isolation, talk about those two, and then what's the danger of isolating that for a student?
You bet. Well, I think it's a good comparison or distinction rather. Like time alone is healthy. I think especially as Christians, I think we all ought to have that time alone, whether you have it in the morning, at nighttime, whether you're prayer, meditating, speaking to God, reading scripture, whatever. I think that's empowering. And of course, introverts love time alone. But I think where it gets unhealthy and unproductive is, again, I don't believe at all we were created to be alone. and isolation and relationships. And I think right now we can only do so much. We can't help it. Obviously, we have social media and things with our families, with our friends. We can catch up and do things like that. But I think as much as you can help it to not be isolated, I know for me, just growing up and throughout my adult life, when I'm isolated, temptations increase, distractions, laziness. I'm my easiest critic in that sense of like, oh yeah, I don't need to do anything today, or oh yeah, no, I've done this, or I'm thinking these thoughts are unhealthy, but nobody knows. When I'm with loved ones or buddies that I meet with regularly, just to hold me accountable, they're gonna ask me hard questions. And I don't think in isolation any kind of healthy growth ever occurs. Not to suggest you can't grow in your relationship with Christ when you're alone, as you said earlier, but I don't think in isolation you present really other people the opportunity to love on you and to know you, and you're not going to be near as honest with your probably yourself as you have to be with other people. I think so. I just think in general, isolation is just not healthy. And again, I think I mentioned that as far as addictive behaviors, those of my clients that I see right now, they're guys especially, they're struggling with porn, and I've got a lot of alcoholics that I see right now. They're really struggling because they're not out, and so that they've got to have some form of, they feel like self-soothing. They've got to cope with this, and so I can't talk to people. I'm alone with my own thoughts. Clearly in isolation, I'm going to be easiest on myself and just do what comes naturally to me. So I think for all those reasons, isolation is not healthy and not good for us. But the hard part is we're being forced to do that. And there's so many studies that are done. Talk about when you isolate, your immune system is compromised, and your inflammation increases. So if you have diabetes or you have gut issues or whatever, this makes it worse. So again, I know there's been a time and a purpose for this, and we've had to do it, but it's just awful. So the hope is this just doesn't continue very long. I think it's going to have long-term effects and ramifications
Yeah,
because we've been forced into self-isolation, which again isn't healthy, I don't think.
that's good. That's good. Hey, I wanted to ask about social media real quick. I know this is something a lot of students are involved with. Well, heck, us adults
Mm.
too. But I know there's a lot of good, but especially right now, what are some of the things, some of the dangers of social media for our students, high school, college age students that they just kind of need to watch and just be careful about?
You bet. Well, and I think I guess I'd start with I mean, if there's a benefit to it, I'm giving lots of talks on this too in schools, and, the dangers of social media and how we isolate more, and kids are not having face-to-face relationships, not learning to really grow like we were forced to in the day. But I do think it's good as a way to connect right now. So if you and I are being able to do this, we couldn't do it any other way. So I think it's healthy to do it within limitations. And again, those boundaries are such that I think anything done too much can become a negative thing. So I think with social media, just in general, that I would usually say to parents, educators, et cetera, but certainly parents is, like the Snapchat and all that. And when you're in school, I know it's a bigger deal with peer pressure and bullying, and kids just tend to become really tough and say things they wouldn't usually otherwise do on social media. I haven't looked at stats in the last 4 weeks when this has been going on. Has that increased more? Has that become worse? But again, I think it's too easy for kids to make that their norm. My son loves Xbox. He's a big Xboxer, and if we let him, he would play 12 to 18 hours a day if he didn't have boundaries, limits on it. Again, a little bit of it's okay, but I think where it becomes destructive is again, you get those pleasure centers of the brain. We got these chemicals, dopamine in our brain, and it gives instant pleasure when you're doing games or when you go on social media and like Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram, whatever, and you get to see what's going on with people. It's this pleasure effect we're producing in our brains. A little bit of it's not bad, but we're getting too much of it, and we're starting to, I need my phone even more. I need to constantly be looking at my status updates. It's just not healthy. Not to mention the comparing that we do with one another. I know a lot of families was the last weekend, we were all kind of holed in. We couldn't go to church. And we saw families that had Easter pictures of their families and their Easter dresses and all that on. Well, that was awesome. That was a great idea. We didn't do it. So I felt like a big loser as a dad that we did nothing. We stayed in our shorts. It's like I'm dressed now. We had a neat little time together as a family. I'm like, gosh, should we have done pictures? Wouldn't have known that if I wasn't worried about it. So
Right.
that's probably what I'd say on social media. It's not natural, but it's become the norm for kids. So I just think you have to put limits with it.
Yeah. Well, one last question before I let you go. Just talk about the importance of giving yourself, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, giving yourself grace in this time. I think a lot of people, because they're not on schedules, or a lot of students, a
Mhm.
lot of them thrive on scheduling, thrive on getting things done and receiving feedback, and can be really hard on themselves, really negative. But I think, especially right now, all the time, but especially right now, I think, giving yourself a little bit of grace is good. Would you talk about that for a second for the student?
Yeah, sure. I think those of us who have more of that resounding inner critic even more so need that. One of the things there was a book I read, gosh, a few years ago on self-compassion. Can't say who wrote it. It was a really good book. And just talking about just the whole idea, notion of, we're so good, I think in general, not for necessarily healthy reasons, probably more for pressures and societal norms, but we're so good at extending that oftentimes to other people in public, at work, wherever. Maybe not so much with our spouses and our kids because we know each other too well and we're too comfortable to not be that way. But I think it was just a kind of for me, an example, or not an example, but it was a message when I read that book of like, it sounds really cheesy and cliche and kind of spiritually to say, but like, I should be giving myself more grace, compassion during this time than any other time in my life. And if I can't do that for me, how am I going to expect to do that for other people? So I think it's just that, we're humans and we're struggling, and who put us on this pedestal that, expect ourselves to perform at a certain level or to be something that we're not, or to be conforming like some of our friends or other people are doing. I mean, why do we do that? Why are we so hard on ourselves? So I think it's important to do that. One example I use a lot too with clients is when we talk about just lacking love for themselves and extending that grace is when we talk about the two grace commandments, first being, loving God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And the second being, I think we don't think through this a lot, but loving our neighbors ourselves is our second one, right? But it's actually loving ourselves, really, technically, is the second commandment. Third, to me, would be loving your neighbor. And again, if we can't extend that compassion and love to ourselves, and if God asks that of us, I'd even go as far as to say it demands that of us, how are we going to do it with other people? So I just think it's something that it's not normal. It's not been natural for me throughout my life, being inner critic, full of negativity, and just being really, really hard on myself. But gosh, I mean, God created me. He loves me. So it's such a slap in his face when I can't extend that grace to me. So it's really healthy to do it. Hard to do. It's a hard practice to get into.
Right, right.
It really,
It's
really
easy.
makes all the difference.
Yeah, it's easier to be more critical on yourself sometimes than it is to be gracious to yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Man, well, I appreciate your time. Anything else you want to add before we cut our time here? Any last words of wisdom from you?
Man, I don't know if it'd be anything new, but I think that as you and I were, as I was thinking just through you and I being able to talk today, and again, because we've not ever been through anything like this before, I think we have such a unique opportunity, especially as believers, to show and model to the world like what it really looks like to take care of self and family, and to really place importance on what we all say is priority to us. And when we're acting just like everybody else, it's all full of fear and fret and worry, and we're condemning ourselves and we're hard on us, and we're talking to our kids terribly, and we're not modeling healthy behaviors as parents, and our kids are isolating more, and people are just struggling. Like, what a great opportunity to say, gosh, like, yes, we're in the same boat as everybody else in the world, but we're supposed to act different. We're supposed to be different than that. So again, it's not so much what we're doing and our strength. I think it's just channeling the Holy Spirit through us and really just letting God work in and through us, and just realizing again, he's not shocked. He's not sitting in the cosmos going, "Oh my gosh," biting his fingernails. What, I didn't know about this virus in Wuhan, and I know what to do. Like, he knew about all of it. And so I think it's just to relax and just be mindful and just breathe and just say it's going to be fine. We're going to be okay. We'll get through it together. And even if it's through things like this, we'll do the best we can. And hopefully the restrictions lift sooner than later. But if not, then you have to make the best of it. So
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Well, Todd, thanks for joining us today. And don't forget, you can check out Todd at Daehnert Counseling. I'll have his website again on the screen. And Todd, I hope you have a great day, rest of the week. Stay safe and wash your hands.
all right, buddy, man. Thanks, Jimmy. Good talking to
See
you,
you.
buddy.
Good.